Hello, everybody. My name is Ally. I am an author. I am a content creator, a ghostwriter, ambassador for women's health and happiness. And I'm also Annie Gibbins, executive producer at Women's Biz Global. So you might have seen my name flying around the last few months or even year in your inbox or Facebook, but it's so wonderful to sort of put a face to the name. And I really hope that if I haven't met you, we can connect. And for those of you who know me, hello, it's good to see you again. I was speaking at Annie's last Success Summit in 2022. I nearly forgot what year we're in. And here I am again talking about my magic mindset shift. And for those who were not present at last year's summit or who haven't actually seen my summit talk, which you can do in Thinkific, please sign up. That's not a plug, but please sign up because there's a wealth of amazing women speakers. I spoke about a story that was very personal to me and that became a massive cause and in essence became a turnaround moment for me in life, and it has led me to so much success and happiness. And just to give you a snapshot, and I do want to obviously preface the next part of this content by saying you might be triggered by what I say. It's to do with anatomy and women's health, so please take a moment. But part of that story talked about a medical diagnosis that I received at the age of just 16 years old. I was practically a child. And this diagnosis was called and is called Mayer-Rokitansky-Kauster-Hauser syndrome. And this is a syndrome that is congenital, meaning it's present at birth. It affects 1 in 5,000 females, and it is characterized by the underdevelopment or absence of a uterus, a cervix, and a vaginal canal. And it was alerted to me because I actually never received my first period. And because it's congenital, and because it was the way that my body was formed, it was never picked up at birth. And I should sort of a bit of biology. I did form these ovaries. So we know all the diagrams. Here's the ovaries. And my estrogen was firing. So that was good externally. And typically, you'd never know. But because we are formed outside in, the inside reproductive system in that first 6 to 8 weeks of gestation, it hit a pothole. And I look at genetics, and it was described to me by a wonderful friend, is there is a genetic pathway, lots of pathways, and it was ding, 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 reproductive system. And this was the part that mutated, and the whole message was gone. The pathway was shattered. And when I didn't receive my first period at 16, I went to the doctors and they sent me away for a year, thinking I was a late starter, but 1 year later, no period arrived. And it was later diagnosed in a fabulous hospital in London. I'm half Aussie, half Brit. I lived in Bondi for 15 years, I should add, where I was diagnosed with this condition. And it meant that I was and am biologically unable to carry a child. But there was treatment available for the creation of a vaginal canal. And I went through that treatment at such a tender age of 16 years old. And it unfortunately made a massive impact on my life because I struggled to identify as a woman. And I know genetically and chromosomally, like I have XX chromosomes, 46XX female, but it's not about that. It's about identity, and it's about slotting into what your society thinks or says you should be. It's about thinking about, okay, well, as a woman, if I can't be a mother, what will my role be? If I can't be a sexual partner from the get-go, what kind of partner would I be? And so you're in this huge junction in life as we are in our teens, thinking about the future and going, everything I thought I knew and heard is completely not part of my future. And yes, I went through some very difficult situations with the medical treatment to create a vaginal canal. It took me 9 big months, but I've also come to terms with, I should say, 20 years on, about being infertile. However, there was something always missing, and I've always been a hard worker. That was an ethic passed down to me by my family, but I never did jobs that I loved. I did jobs because I needed money. I did jobs because that's what I was taught to do, work hard, but I've never done a job because it filled me with passion. And that has changed. I'm so happy to say. But it was in a series of turnaround moments about 8-9 years ago, through family health problems, living in a suburb in Bondi, that exposed me to yoga, and truly an environment that allowed me to kind of unpeel the stuff that I had very, very well tight-knit together. And I was in a relationship of 10 years. And this relationship was coming to its end. And I think a lot of us who have been through long-term relationships that have ended will probably quite categorically say the expiration date was well before the breakup. And it was just before the breakup for me in this long-term relationship where I sent an email. And this email was my magic mindset shift. In this email, I sent to an incredible hospital in Sydney. I need help. I need to understand my medical diagnosis. And I had seen support groups around the globe, in London and Boston, only actually 2, to be honest, that had successfully facilitated help for a patient beyond the diagnosis experience. So we go to the diagnosis room, we see a doctor, they deliver the diagnosis, the treatment, the symptoms, and their job is done. But what next? And peer support is so profound. And I was looking for that. In this email, I was so grateful that it happened to land in the inbox of the CEO of the hospital. And I didn't know it was going to be to the CEO. I just thought it probably would be to some sort of, I want to say CRM, the sort of the systems that like bulk capture emails. But it was filtered out to the perfect person, the head of gynae. And they emailed me back within days, which is always a significant flag to say, okay, we're onto something. They said to me, Ally, thank you so much for reaching out to us. We do not have a support group that you need, but we want to create one. And we're willing to create one for you, but we want to create one with you. Because the importance of having the medical staff and the patients together gives the perfect holistic treatment plan. And this was the email that saved my life. In essence, it was very interesting because I had never done this before. And this is kind of what I want to talk to you today about, is how to create your purpose-driven cause or passion from scratch. And I'd always had experience in the business world. I'd been in education for 10 years, working at a university. I had been a pub manager, a hotel manager as well. I had done all these jobs that equipped me perfectly to manage something. And that's what we did. And so I want to sort of say to you today, my first rule is send the email. Because you don't know where that email is going to land. And life can change in a message, in an email, in a conversation. So sometimes we go so big in our plans, we don't really need to. We just need to go back to that very first point. Who are you trying to connect with? How can you form a relationship? And then what comes next? And so a little bit about the next part is thinking about back to basics. So if you are creating something from scratch, and I'm not even thinking about charity or not-for-profit status, that's later, it has to be treated like any other business. You have to think about, what is your objective? What is your market? What is your strategy plan? Who are your stakeholders? And if you have, and I'm not teaching anyone to suck eggs here, but if you are a successful business person or not in the world of business, maybe you're doing something completely different, it's the basics. Because despite the fact that I was doing something driven from a desire to help myself and my life and people, I had to adopt a business mindset pretty quickly. And that's what I did. So it did start with one email. And trust me when I say this, the formula is very easy. I was talking at a medical conference, actually the World Congress for Pediatric and Gynecology for Adolescents 3 years ago, and a doctor spoke in the Q&A part of this conference. I was part of a panel of 4 people, and she said, "Oh my God, Ally, like, what have you done? What have you created? Like, where do we start?" And I said, "You need a room with chairs, a database that you're trying to appeal to, and that is it. You do not need money to book a room. Maybe you do, but hopefully you can seek a spare room in a hospital or a community centre. But yes, a room with chairs and people who are willing to share and empathise and connect, because that is the premise for healing. It's not complex. All the other stuff is amazing, but if you want to start a purpose-driven cause from scratch, you need a community. And so what was also really interesting is you've got to think about your why. So are you developing this because you want money, which is absolutely fine, and we'll come to that later? Are you doing it to help a social cause? Are you doing it for awareness? Are you doing it to bolster this cause to another project or product? And for me, my why was this one woman living in China. And she was the most stoic and quiet and timid young woman. And she had gone through so many hurdles to simply be safe. I always knew that she was my avatar. And so I've always held her and my why close, because if ever I get lost, I can easily flip back to her. And so this is why a decade on, my why has reached 120,000 people globally. So we did talk about the back to basics, which is very simple. But also I think it's important to recognize competition versus collaboration. If you're working within a sector where there's heaps of people doing the same kind of work, most likely they all exist because you're going for your own target audience. But if you're small, like I was, going for a very unique condition, a very taboo and stigmatized condition, I had to look around the traps to see who's doing what I'm doing. What do I want to model myself on? Who is their stakeholders? What are they picking up on? What support do they need? Do they need internet support? Do they need events? Do they need information and support resources? And so very quickly, I knew who my competition was and very quickly turned that into my collaborator. And in fact, my competition, which it wasn't, because as I always say, there's enough pain to go around in the world, they were someone that I reached out to 2 years before I started this, and I knew what worked and I knew what I was looking for. So it made a lot of sense to create the same. And I think the next part is about sussing out your services. So going back to that business model again, what is it that you want from your purpose-driven cause? Is it to create events? Is it to fundraise? Is it to create a buddy system and a peer support network? Are you looking for media? Are you looking to bolster your own profile to go and do a lot more in the sector? I think it's important to think, when you're doing a startup for a social cause with very little funds and maybe skill set, identify, I need a website, I need social media, I have no money, I have no particular skill sets in developing a business, but you need to suss out your services, because it's your services that will get you on track very, very quickly, which will help develop your website and all the conversations you have. So it's really important to get up and close with, what is it that I want to achieve from this cause? Because that, again, is going back to business strategy and operational management. Like, what is it in 6 months, 12 months, 3, 5 years I want to achieve? So suss out your services like you would any other business. And I've never been someone who wants to devalue a movement for a click. However, there is so much we still don't talk about. So it's also really important. Is your cause simply to trigger a conversation? Because that is more than enough. And especially like me at the time, working for a 9 to 5, I didn't have the time to be developing websites. I did outsource, and I did just create a Facebook page at first, because that's what I needed. I had actually an opportunity to do some media, and they said, where am I supposed to send an email? And I was like, oh, my personal email. And I was like, that's not good enough. So I had to create something literally to create an inbox. So sometimes it literally is about really going back to basics. I think one of the biggest things as well, when you're developing a purpose-driven course from scratch, is to consider your volunteer fatigue. And I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but the emotions are wonderful, but you're probably, or possibly like I was, doing a full-time job at the time. And it wasn't long before my inbox was filling up. I was getting phone calls. I had media contacts, researchers, conferences, amazing feedback. But I was getting tired. And so I knew quite early on that I had a 9 to 5, but I also had a 6 to 10 plus weekends. And volunteer fatigue isn't going to help anyone. And it's something that's very, very common, because we are fueled by this passion and this purpose, and we want to help people, and we're getting traction and we're getting attention. We get tired. And that's not going to help anybody 1 year down the track. If I've got to fold, I'm just too tired. So even though you're fueled on purpose and seeing the impact of your work, you may start to feel tired, overwhelmed, and dare I say, maybe a little over it. So please don't beat yourself up for taking the rest, for clocking off, for putting an auto email on your inbox and in your Instagram saying, I'll be back in 2 days. That's more than enough than just disappearing and letting your brilliant cause just sort of flinder away a little bit, because it's needed, but it won't work without a healthy, happy you. And the next part I want to talk about, it actually is based off what I just said about the fatigue, is tap into community, tap into your contacts. Like when I was at the peak of my brilliant charity work, not only was I kind of bored of working alone, because I felt like I had all my life working alone with this condition, I wanted to collaborate. And so I put a call out to people saying, I'm looking for volunteers. These are the areas that I want to work in. What is your skill set? What actually ignites you? Because people have to feel passionate, not just because you've put your hand up, but you want to keep them burning with you. And so I thought, well, what do I do? So I put our call out for volunteers in my community. And then at one point, I think we had, about 15 to 20 people across the globe doing stuff for us. It was incredible. So not only were we working to help our cause, we felt part of something. And I think for so many women, we just want to belong. So by avoiding the burnout in the early days, I really tried to involve my community. The next part of this is called media mishaps. It's very tempting to take all the media. Like, first of all, I should say media is very important. Media is awareness, support, longevity, instant hikes in campaigning, lots of donations and charity funding if that's what you're going for. But there was a lot of times early on I didn't know what the best way was to engage with the media. And I was working, as I said earlier, with a very taboo topic. And so whilst I had lived with it for a lot of years, I wasn't very good at knowing at the time how to talk about it publicly without giving myself a lot of, I guess, fear and nerves. But I also wanted to tell the story without leaving myself with this massive emotional hangover. And I did that a lot in the early days. And it's just something I have to say, because unless your profession or education is around in media, you'll start to gain attention, but not always from the best places. So my golden rule with anything with media is you have to think about, does your gut feel good in this decision? Does your past and your message feel safe? Is your story going to be honored? And you can say an awful lot without saying anything. So for instance, I went through a massive couple of years thinking about my fertility journey, and I wasn't with somebody at the time that wanted to have a child, and certainly wasn't interested in doing it through IVF. But it was a comment that he made over dinner, and that comment I've used very discreetly because it says everything without harming him, me, or giving too much of the story away. So there are some tips about becoming media ready. What's the publication that your story will be shared? Do some research around the stories that they do. It's really important to understand their type of theme, their audience, their readership. Are they seeking an exclusive with you, or are you able to continue sharing with other publications and media outlets? It's really important to understand, is there any such sort of exclusivity agreement in place that you can share with them, but you can't with anybody else for 3 months? Or worse still, you've already shared it and they think that it's new news, and then they sort of go, oh, this is an exclusive. Oh, no, thanks. And it's awful hearing that, because your story is so precious. But we're talking about the media, and the first is everything. I think it's also important to think about, are you emotionally prepared to have international and national exposure? Yes, the goal is to have this massive amount of support and feedback and awareness, but can you emotionally, and your people close to you, cope with the amount of feedback you might get? And I would say that 99% of my feedback has always been amazing, but are you emotionally equipped to deal with the questions, the being out there, the family and friends knowing about something, if your story is particularly sensitive, or you're wanting to share something that's quite taboo or sensitive? Yeah, you just have to be prepared. How do you want your organization to be presented? So you might be acting as a lone person in this organization, in which case you know your brand inside and out, but you might be part of a charity board, you might be part of a group. It's really important to make sure that you're representing your brand as well as your story, which aligns with everybody else in your organization, because they're aligning with you, so therefore your story has to align with them. And it's a very safe and fair practice in order to make sure that if you do have to declare a conflict of interest, or you have to get a charity board endorsement, do that. Because if you don't, it might not always be easy for media along the line. You want to you want to have faith. You want people to trust the fact that you can represent your brand for everybody. Simple thing. If you're doing media, are you doing it via email? Are you doing it via Zoom? Are you doing it through a phone call? Do you have the opportunity to read through the questions? Are you going to be responding to the email questions? Do you have a sign off? These are all things that you're entitled to ask a journalist. A lot of people don't the first time round, but when you're doing something for the first time, knowing the mode of delivery for the interview is crucial, and knowing the sign off is crucial. Because when you do an interview, like talking now, it's crazy. You can say all sorts of things, but you might have that, oh my God, I've said too much remorse, or I probably shouldn't have said that. And sometimes you don't get the sign off, and sometimes it's too late. So understand the mode of the interview. And really, lastly, it comes down to money. When you're developing a purpose-driven course from scratch, you're offering your skills, your service, your time to help people. So I'm looking at a few notes here. Get comfortable with profiting from your purpose. In the 5 years of my peer support group, I chose to outlay all my costs: website development, printing, hosting, travel, phone calls. Just these are simple things, but they started to amount up. And it's okay to get those claimed back through tax, through the charity that you might be working for, or if you're actually presenting for another charity, you're allowed to ask for travel expenses. Don't forget, it doesn't make you any more inauthentic to your cause if you want to financially support it. You have the time, the skills that you're delivering and taking up to help people. It's not a bad thing that you need hosting costs. And we sometimes think in charity work, it should be massively altruistic, and the most part it is. But I just want to stress that point, because I have got comfortable knowing my worth of experience. And I think it's okay to do that too, because at the end of the day, we all have to kind of live. And yeah, that's something I've learned only in the last 5 years, but it's something that has been a game changer for me, because I'm able to do this full time now, whereas before I would just be doing it in the late hours of the evening or early morning, and it just was not sustainable. So see your worth. So I guess I just want to round up that presentation, I guess, for Annie and Women's Biz Global, to really emphasize that anybody can develop a peer support community, a circle for women, a circle for business, a circle for mothers, or whatever it might be. Everybody can do it. It really is quite amazing that you're choosing to do it, and it's changed my life, and I've loved every moment of my journey. It felt so easy that it felt really right. And as we know, some things just can be really hard and they can feel really right. But when I discovered my cause and my purpose and learned everything I did, my whole life changed, and it can for you. So I just want to say that was my magic mindset decade. And I really encourage you to follow your own pursuits and follow your own story and your own purpose, because the world is in shortage of love and support. So be that person. And of course, to Annie, thank you so much once again for creating this incredible platform for some unstoppable powerhouse, inspirational, empowering people. I'm so pleased to be part of this collective. So thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure to share the stage with you. Thanks.